Welcome back, dear students. In today's class, we are going to discuss file handling in Python. In previous class, we have discussed files in Python. We continue that and we'll discuss today file handling in Python. Dear students, towards handling file, in the previous class, I have discussed how to open a file, whereas now I am going to discuss how to read from a file. While the file handle doesn't contain the data for the file, it is quite easy to construct a for loop to read through and count each of the lines in a file. Dear students, as I have discussed in previous class, when we open a file, we are going to get a variable, say, which is called as a open function is going to return a variable which is called as a file handle. And even I have told that file handle doesn't contain any data. Okay, so because of that, to read a data in a file, we are supposed to use that file handle and use some function or say some method to read from the file. So here is one example. Fand is equal to open, and here there is a one file whose name is mbox-short.txt. So what this particular code does is it will going to count a number of lines in a given file. Okay, initially count is taken 0, and for a line in fand, count is equal to count plus 1. For every line in a file handle, say the count will be incremented, and at the end the number of lines will be printed. So if you want, I'll show you this. What I do, dear students, here I'm going to type a file, like say for example, the name of the file is linecount.py. I'll take a variable called fand is equal to open, and the file name that I'm going to give is mbox-short.txt. So this is the file name, and because it's a string, it should be included in a single quote. Okay, so once the file is open, we need to initialize a variable to count the number of lines. I take the variable name as count is equal to 0, and later say we'll read from a file using a for loop. For a item in this particular sequence, okay, so it's like a for line in fand, what we are going to do here, say we'll just count, increase the count is equal to count plus 1. So and later say we are going to print line counts. Okay, so here line count is this count. So let me save this and show you the execution, dear students. And mbox.txt file is here itself. This is mbox-short.txt. Okay, so if I execute this particular Python code using Python 3 interpreter, you can see, dear students, there are 1910 lines in this code. So even I can show you that particular file mbox-short.txt. Say if I open this is the file. In previous class I have told mbox.txt, which is a very lengthier file, but this is a short file. If I open, you can see here even there are 1910 number of lines. L stands for lines, and 94,626 number of characters. Even the same thing, we have counted the number of lines and it's 1910. Hope this is clear to all of you, dear students. We can use a file handle as a sequence in our for loop. Okay, so even we used that. Our for loop simply counts the number of lines in a file and prints them out. The rough translation of a for loop into English is, means if you read this in English, it is something like, for each line in the file represented by the file handle, add 1 to the count. Means for every line in a file that is represented by a file handle, increase the count by 1. Okay, this is a for loop that we have used to read a file. The reason that the open function doesn't read the entire file is that the file might be quite large with many gigabytes of data. Dear students, when we open a file, as I told, it will not open the file. Instead, it will going to give a file handle, and using the file handle, we need to read from the file. Why? What's the reason? The reason is the file size may vary from say few bytes to a few gigabytes, even many gigabytes. Because of that, if the file is smaller, yes, we can read the file at a time. But if the file is something like in gigabytes, and that much memory will not be there, that much main memory will not be there. then it will be difficult to read that file. Because of that, the open statement takes the same amount. Dear students, one thing is very important. Whether the file size is few bytes or many gigabytes, the open statement will going to take same amount of time regardless of the size of the file, because it will going to just open. It will not read from the file. The opening of that particular file, it is irrespective of the size. The for loop actually causes the data to be read from the file. Okay, after opening, whatever the for loop we use, it will going to read from the file. That will going to take a different amount of time depending upon the size of the file. When the file is read using a for loop in this manner, means whatever the code we have seen so far just now, Python takes care of splitting the data into the file into separate lines using a new line character. Means when we have written for line in f, and how does this particular Python code is going to count? It will going to split whatever the data is there in a file using a new line character. Means it will search for a new line character. Till new line character it will going to consider. Once again it will going to search for a new line character. Means the total file will be divided into a number of strings with a new line character. Okay, Python reads each line through the new line and includes the new line as the last character in the line variable for each iteration of the for loop. Very important, dear students, when the Python is going to read a line like this, it even appends or includes the new line also as the last variable in that particular string. Because the for loop reads the data one line at a time, it can efficiently read and count the lines in a very large files without running out of the main memory to store the data. Dear students, remember one thing, if at all the open function is going to read the whole file, if the file size is in gigabytes, say for example around 10 gigabytes, the RAM size, which is the main memory of your computer, may be just 2 gigabytes or say 4 gigabytes or 8 gigabytes. Even out of that much of the memory might be used for operating system and other applications. So you won't be having that much memory. Because of that, say using means reading a file using a for loop, say it is going to manage the main memory properly. Because at a time only one line is read and only that much is copied into main memory, and later you can process on that. In this particular case, the processing means we are just counting that line. Instead of that, you can do any other things. Even you can print that particular line. Okay, so because of that, say this particular method is a very efficient method to read the entire file irrespective of the size of that file. The above program means whatever the program we discussed can count the lines in any size file using a very little memory, since each line is read, counted and then discarded. Once that particular line is read and once you process with that line, when you read the next second line, the first line is discarded. So we never run out of the memory. If we know the file size is relatively small compared to the size of our main memory, we can read the whole file into one string using the read method on the file handling. Dear students, say for example, sometimes instead of reading a line by line, if the file is very small, like say for example 10 lines, 20 lines or 150 lines, something like that, we can read the entire file using a just one particular method, and the name of that method is read. As usual, dear students, using a open function we can open a file. So dear students, I have told a difference between function and a method. So method is a function, but it can work only on that particular object. Say for example, here in this case, f and is a file object and read is a method, so which will work on a file object. And normal function we will just write a name, whereas a method, for a method, so first there will be a object, later dot operator, later and afterwards the name of the function. The function which will work on a particular object called as a method. Keep that in mind, dear students. Whereas these are general function, it can work on any kind of objects. Whereas this particular, so when we use with a dot operator, this particular function will work only on this object. It will not work on another, it's a different object. This I am going to discuss in detail once we start object oriented concept. In this particular case, dear students, what we are doing, we are using a read method. And what this read method does, it is going to read the entire file and store in a input variable. Means everything will be stored as a string. And later if we try to print, select print length of this particular string, it will going to print that. Okay, so even we can work on that particular string. I'll show you this. Like in this case, whatever the code is there, that file line count, so that itself I am going to modify. Okay, so here after opening the file, so what I do, I'm going to take some variable, like say for example any variable, like I'll take in only. In is equal to, so let me read that, so using f and dot read, this is a method. Okay, so afterwards, so let me print that, print inf. So I'll make it very simple, print in. Let me see what will be the output of this. You can see, dear students, the total file has been printed. Okay, so this is the total file, so which has been printed here. 1910 lines are there in this particular file. So it is scrolling, like say for example from here it has been printed, okay, till the last. And if at all we want to count number of characters, print length of int. So I'll comment this, printing a string, and just I want to see the number of characters in this. Okay, so 94,626. Even I shown this, dear students. So after opening the file, say here, this you can see there are 94 here at the end. There are 94,626 characters. Okay, the same thing even say it's there. Okay, so means if at all we know that the size of file is very small, then we can use a read method to read a whole file at a time, and later we can work on that. And so this read method is going to return a string. So the total file will be returned as a string. So even say for that's what. So you can take a slice of that. You know this is a string slicing. From beginning to 20 characters it will going to print. Okay, so that you can see later. When the file is read in this manner, all the characters including all of the lines and new line characters are stored in a one big string in a variable called int, which we have taken. It is good idea to store a output of a read as a variable, because each call to read exhausts the resource. Dear students, so if at all we are going to read a file using a read method, then once we read it should be stored in some variable for further processing. And one more important thing is, when we store like that, we need to process. As on when we store, we need to process. If the reading is only at once, and if the size of the file is smaller, just store it and later you can process. But if the size is very bigger, then read method may exhaust the total memory. So like, dear students, I'm going to start a Python 3 interpreter, and let me use a function open to open a file. Like say mbox hyphen, I use a file short.txt. What I do after opening, so let me print the number of lines in it. Okay, say print len, say f and dot read. Yes, so this particular method means a read method. It will going to read the entire file, and len is going to count the number of characters in it, and print is going to print the characters. You can see it is 94626. And if at all I use this particular method again, look at, dear students, we got 0. Okay, nothing but once the file is read, means once the file is opened, here we have opened the file and here we have read the file. The meaning of that is, say once we open the file, say for example here, say if I show you, say opening of some file, this file, it will start from the first character to read, and it reads that till the end of the file. Till the end of the file it will going to read, and later if at all we try to read again, here in second case we are trying to read again, when it has reached the end of file, there is nothing to read. Because of that, dear students, here we have got 0. Even if I read, say for example, if I print, let me use Python interpreter, open the file again, and here say once I'm going to print a length, and second time, say instead of printing length, what I do, I'm going to print what a read function is going to give. You can see nothing. means there is nothing to read. Already it has read the total file. Okay, so even if you say second time, if you want to read it again, but you cannot. For that purpose, you are supposed to close a file and later open it again to read. Okay, that we'll see it. This form of open function should only be used if the file data will fit comfortably in the main memory of a computer. If the file is too large to fit in a main memory, we should write our program to read the file in chunks using a for or while loop. Means, dear students, if the file is very large so that it cannot be accommodated in a main memory, then we can read that such a file into chunks. Instead of a full file, we need to read chunk by chunk. With this, we'll proceed further to searching through a file. Means, once we open a file, normally why we work on a file, say for example, there we might have stored some data in a file and we want to retrieve some information, some data from that file. Like say for example, say we have stored a student's records in a particular file using a USN, and if I get the USN, I'll get the total data of a student. Means I need to search for the particular USN. Okay, so when we are searching through the data in a file, it is very common pattern to read through a file, ignoring most of the lines and only processing lines which meet a particular condition. Means, dear students, like say for example, USN means university seat number. For you, it will be of say for example 10 characters. And every 10 characters means it's not that we'll search for that particular string whose length is 10 characters. What is speciality is, say your USN will start with 2BL. Means the college code is 2BL. It will start with 2BL. You need to search for that particular string which will start with 2BL and later the format. Later year will be there. Say for example, the year is 21. Later the department. If it is going to match everything, then only we need to read the total string. We can combine the pattern for reading a file with string methods to build a simple search mechanism. So we'll see that, dear students, how to do it. For example, if we wanted to read a file and only print out lines which starts with a prefix from, we could use a string method starts with to select only those lines with a desired prefix. Dear students, if you see, say for example, here, say there is a file called mbox-short.txt. Here, say it is a short form of a file mailbox. You can see here, it will start with from and who has sent and time, date, everything it is there. And next, say this is a message ID and so many things are there. Okay. So once again, say there will be second. Once again, say who has sent. Okay. Like this, all mails headers are there in this particular file. Okay. So here, if at all I want to print only those lines which will start with from, means I want only this particular line, and later I don't want any other lines. Once again, I want only this particular line which will start with from. How can we do that? Dear students, to do that, what we can do is, first you open that particular file. You want to count how many such files are there, or say you want to even print. What you can do, say if at all you want to count, you can take count is equal to 0, otherwise just ignore it. There is a method called starts with. If line dot starts with, if it starts with whatever you have given inside this string, then print that line. Simple, dear students, try to understand. There's a method called starts with. What this method does is, it is going to check whether that particular line will starts with this string. If it will start with this string, then this particular condition will become true and it will proceed further. And here it will going to print. Okay, so I'll show you this, dear students. So what I do, I'm going to open a file. I'll give like starts with .py. Say here, what I do initially, I'm going to open a file. Say f hand is equal to say open. What's the name of the file? It is mbox-short.txt is the name of the file. So after opening, say what I'll do, for line, say for every line in f hand. Okay, so what we do, say here we'll check if that particular line dot starts with, if it starts with from, then here colon, then here we are going to print that line. So let me just save this and execute using Python 3 interpreter. You can see, dear students, it has printed only those lines which will start with from. You can see here Stephen.Marikud at uct.ac.za. So this is the first line which will start with from. Even I will show you that by opening that particular. Look at, dear students, this is the first one. Like that, so it has read the total all the lines in it which will start with from. Hope this is clear to all of you, dear students. Thank you for watching.